Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The Thompson mansion shone under the sparkling lights of crystal chandeliers. Guests, dressed in their finest attire, sipped champagne while discussing future plans and the family's thriving business. The event was celebrating the announcement of the marriage of William Thompson, the patriarch's only son, to Elizabeth, a young woman with a perfect smile and impeccable appearance. Yet beneath the peals of laughter and hearty toasts, there was an unease in the air. William, usually self-assured, stood to one side, his hands clenched around a small wooden box. His heart was pounding. He knew what he held could upend the perfect world his parents had built. Time seemed to slow down around him. The guests continued to enjoy themselves, oblivious to the brewing storm. William took a deep breath, ready to face the truth. "Dad! Don't marry her," he suddenly shouted, breaking the veil of illusion that covered the evening. Silence fell immediately. All eyes focused on the young man and what he held in his hands, a secret capable of destroying everything. The music and laughter in the hall stilled as William took a step forward. All eyes turned to him, surprised by his serious expression and pale face. He still clutched the small wooden box to his chest, as if protecting some treasure or poison within. "William, what are you doing?" his mother, Mrs. Thompson, asked worriedly, while his father frowned, sensing an unusual tension in the air. William walked forward with purpose, his legs trembling slightly. He lifted the box and slowly opened it in front of all the guests, as if to reveal a truth he had kept hidden for too long. Inside lay a carefully folded document and a small, shiny object. The document bore signatures, letters, and evidence of questionable transactions, while the object, an antique jewel, looked familiar to those familiar with the history of certain high society families. "Daddy! Don't marry her!" William shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. The guests jumped, some dropping their glasses in shock at the unexpected scene. The silence fell, heavy and oppressive. All eyes turned to Elizabeth, who remained frozen, unable to smile or find an excuse. The patriarch, Mr. Thompson, stepped forward slowly, his face grave. "William, what does all this mean?" he asked, his voice low but firm. William took a deep breath, his gaze determined. "What you see in this box is the truth, Dad. Elizabeth is not who you think she is. She deceived, manipulated, and lied to several families. And this object, she stole it." A murmur rippled through the room. The guests exchanged worried glances, as the golden atmosphere of the party transformed into palpable tension. The evening, which was supposed to be one of joy and love, had just descended into chaos and the unexpected. The murmur of the guests grew louder as William explained, his voice shaky but firm. Some instinctively backed away, others stared at Elizabeth in disbelief. The young woman, frozen at first, felt her mask of control begin to crack. "William, you have no proof," she tried to reply, her voice soft but betraying a hint of panic. She stepped forward, trying to retrieve the box from William, but he took a step back, his gaze hardening. "I'm not lying, Elizabeth." William unfolded the document and held it up in front of everyone. "Here is proof of your manipulations and threats to get what you wanted. And this item," he held up the antique jewel, "was stolen from a private collection. I found it at your house while packing up your things." The guests exchanged shocked glances, some dropping their champagne glasses. The heavy silence was broken by the sound of a chair being accidentally dropped by Mrs. Thompson. Elizabeth tried to remain calm, but her hands were shaking slightly. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her perfect smile beginning to fade. Patriarch Thompson stepped forward, his face grim. "William, why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, his deep voice echoing through the hall. William took a deep breath. "Because I wanted to be sure, Dad. I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. And now that I have it, I can't marry her." At that moment, the tension in the room reached its peak. The guests, until then fascinated by the elegance and richness of the celebration, understood that this perfect marriage was nothing more than a fragile illusion about to collapse. Elizabeth, feeling her facade crumbling, stepped back, her eyes desperately searching for a way out. But William's determined gaze told her he wouldn't back down. The evening had just taken a turn for the unexpected, and everyone, even the most sophisticated of the guests, felt the icy thrill of the truth that had just been revealed. The silence in the hall was almost deafening. Every guest held their breath, unable to look away from William and the casket he proudly held. The crystal lamps reflected the light off the antique jewel, revealing its delicate engravings and mysterious luster. Elizabeth, trembling, searched for an excuse, a word, anything to save her reputation. "William, you don't understand, it's complicated," she stammered. But her hesitant tone only confirmed the guests' worst suspicions. A murmur ran through the room, some whispered about Elizabeth's past, about rumors of financial manipulation and shady dealings. Others moved closer to examine the document William had shown, seeing for themselves the irrefutable evidence. "Look at this," William said, pointing to the letters and signatures on the document. "These are threats and manipulations written in his handwriting. And this jewel," he held it up higher, "belonged to the Whitmore family's private collection, stolen last year. I found it among his belongings." At that moment, Elizabeth's face turned white. She tried to explain, but every word she spoke seemed to betray her further. Some guests frowned, while others murmured quietly, shocked by the revelation. Mrs. Thompson, William's mother, moved closer to her son and whispered, "My God, how did you find out about all this?" William looked at her seriously. "I found the box by chance while tidying up his things, Mom. I couldn't ignore the truth." Mr. Thompson, the patriarch, stood motionless, visibly stunned. After a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, he approached Elizabeth, his face grave and his voice icy. "Elizabeth, I want you to leave this house immediately." Elizabeth, unable to bear the gaze of all these witnesses, stepped back in dismay. She knew that her reputation and her future marriage had just crumbled in front of a room full of merciless witnesses. William, still determined, placed the box on a nearby table. The secret he held had just changed the course of the evening, transforming a celebration into a collective shock that would leave an indelible mark on the memories of all the guests. The hall, moments earlier filled with laughter and music, was now plunged into a heavy, tense silence. The guests looked at each other in disbelief, some whispering, others staring at Elizabeth with a mixture of anger and disgust. I don't understand," stammered one of the guests, a longtime family friend. "How is this possible?" Elizabeth, her eyes misty with panic, tried to compose herself. It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling but full of false assurance. "William, you're exaggerating." William stared at her, his gaze hard and cold. "I'm not exaggerating, Elizabeth. Every word, every piece of evidence here is real. I can't marry someone who has manipulated, lied, and stolen." Mrs. Thompson shook her head in shock. "Elizabeth, why? Why betray us like this?" The guests' murmurs quickly turned into audible conversations, each expressing their outrage. Some guests said they had heard rumors about Elizabeth, but no one had dared to believe them, until now. One of the men present, a former business partner, stepped forward. "That's exactly what I was talking about. I was a victim of his manipulations." Others nodded, confirming the accusations. Elizabeth stepped back, feeling her hold on the evening and on William slipping. "You don't understand anything. You know nothing about me," she shouted, but her voice was lost in the din of revelations and accusations. Mr. Thompson, usually authoritative and calm, finally spoke. His voice was low but commanding. "Elizabeth, you have betrayed our trust, you have deceived my son, and you have dared to bring deception into this house. You must leave now." At that moment, Elizabeth realized she had lost control. Her perfect smile was gone, replaced by fear and anger. The guests could no longer ignore the truth. The perfect wedding they were celebrating had just collapsed under the weight of the secrets revealed. William, still holding the box, felt strangely liberated. He had made the most difficult decision of his life, but he knew he had acted with courage and integrity. And in this sumptuous hall, injustice had just been exposed. The hall was now filled with an almost palpable tension. The guests stared at William and his father, waiting to see the patriarch's reaction. Mr. Thompson, usually confident and authoritative, seemed hesitant for the first time, torn between love for his son and the shock of the revelations. William took a deep breath, still clutching the box to his chest. "Dad," he said in a calm but firm voice, "I don't want to disappoint you, or the family, but I can't marry her. Not after everything I've discovered." Mr. Thompson looked away, his expression closed. He knew his son was telling the truth. He had always instilled in William the values of honesty and integrity, and he knew this moment demanded that he uphold those principles. "William," the patriarch began, his voice deep, "you know this marriage would have brought important alliances to our family. But, if that's what you think is right, then I trust you." William felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had dreaded his father's judgment, fearing the decision would provoke anger and disappointment. But instead, he felt a silent, almost solemn support. Mrs. Thompson approached her son, her eyes brimming with tears. "My darling. I'm proud of you. You had the courage to tell the truth, even when it would have been easier to remain silent." William looked around. The guests were still murmuring among themselves, but most now understood the gravity of the revelations. Elizabeth, cornered and unable to respond, had left the hall under everyone's accusing gaze. The choice was made. William had just rejected a marriage arranged by self-interest and superficiality, choosing honesty and truth. In the silence that followed, everyone realized that this refusal was not just a personal act, but a symbol of courage and dignity in the face of manipulation. For the first time since the beginning of the evening, William felt at peace. He had made the right choice, and nothing and no one could blame him. Elizabeth, still panting, turned to William, her eyes shining with anger mixed with fear. "William, you don't understand. This is all over the place," she shouted, her voice trembling but determined to regain control. William stared at her, his gaze cold and unwavering. "I understand perfectly, Elizabeth. I understand everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every act you've committed." The guests held their breath, fascinated by this confrontation. Some murmured among themselves, others exchanged incredulous glances. Elizabeth, sensing that her excuses and justifications were not enough, raised her voice. "You're all being unfair. No one knows what I had to do to succeed." A guest stepped forward, shaking his head. "This isn't about success, Elizabeth. It's about deception and theft." William then took the box and placed it on the table in front of all the guests. "Every piece of evidence here is real. I've checked every document, every detail. And this jewel," he showed it again, "is not yours. It must be returned to its rightful owner." Elizabeth paled, realizing that her last hopes were fading. She tried one last time to manipulate the situation, addressing William's parents directly. "You understand. I just wanted your son and this family." Mrs. Thompson shook her head firmly. "No, Elizabeth. You wanted to deceive and manipulate. And you were found out." Mr. Thompson concluded gravely, "It's time for you to go and face up to your actions." Elizabeth felt her legs buckle and turned away, aware that her perfect facade had crumbled. The guests witnessing this scene understood that power and wealth are never enough to mask the truth and that William's courage had triumphed over deception and manipulation. Silence gradually fell in the hall, but everyone knew that this evening would be remembered as the moment the truth came to light. William, for his part, finally felt free and in control of his life. The heavy silence in the hall was soon replaced by whispers, then more audible words. Several guests approached William, expressing their admiration and support. "William, you did the right thing," said an influential businessman and longtime family friend. "I myself was a victim of his manipulations in the past, and you had the courage to speak out." Others agreed, recounting similar experiences: financial manipulation, subtle threats, unfair behavior they had attributed to luck or chance, until William revealed the box. Mrs. Thompson turned to her son, her eyes shining with pride. "You saved our family, William." William felt a surge of relief and inner power. This unexpected support confirmed that his decision was not only right, but necessary. Elizabeth, now alone and cornered, tried to smile, but no one paid her any attention. The guests' stares were accusing, and her authority over the situation was completely gone. "It's time to return this jewel to its rightful owner," William declared, picking up the phone to call the Whitmore family. The guests watched, fascinated, as justice began to be served before their eyes. The evening, once intended to celebrate a wedding, had become a triumph of truth and integrity. William had not only protected his family, but had also restored justice, and all the guests understood that they had just witnessed an act of exceptional courage. Elizabeth, seeing the overwhelming support around William and realizing that her position was hopelessly compromised, felt panic seize her. Her once controlled face completely fell. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she yelled, her voice betraying her fear. "You'll regret what you're doing." But no one moved. The guests, now in solidarity with William, remained calm and impassive, some murmuring, "It's too late, she's been unmasked." Elizabeth looked around, searching for an exit. She spotted the main entrance and, with a quick movement, rushed towards the door. Her elegance and confidence were gone, replaced by desperate flight. William remained motionless, the casket still within reach. "Farewell, Elizabeth," he murmured, his tone neutral but charged with gravity. No sooner had she left the lobby than several guests called the authorities to report the theft of the jewel and the financial manipulation. William's phone had already recorded all the evidence necessary for swift action by the courts. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't a silence heavy with tension, but a silence of victory. William felt an inner peace he had never known. He had done the right thing, protected his family, and exposed the truth without compromise. Mrs. Thompson hugged her son, moved. "You were amazing, darling. You did what no one else would have the courage to do." Mr. Thompson, in a serious but proud tone, concluded, "Tonight, you have proven that honesty and courage are always more powerful than lies and deception." Thus, what could have been a disaster turned into a lesson in strength, truth, and integrity. Elizabeth had fled, but William and his family had gained something far more precious: the certainty of always choosing the right path. In the following days, the Thompson mansion gradually returned to calm. The storm caused by Elizabeth and her manipulations had subsided, giving way to an atmosphere of reflection and renewal. William, alongside his parents, worked to repair the scars of that dramatic evening and restore the family's image among their friends and business associates. The now symbolic casket was placed in the family library as a permanent reminder of truth and courage. The documents were handed over to the proper authorities, and the antique jewel was returned to its rightful owner, bringing a sense of justice accomplished. The guests who had witnessed the confrontation continued to speak of William with admiration. Some came to thank him for his courage, others for protecting the integrity of the Thompson family. Each message, each call, reinforced William's conviction that he had made the right decision. Mrs. Thompson, moved, often said to William, "You have not only saved our family, but you have also shown everyone that honesty and uprightness still have their place, even in the face of the most skillful lie." Mr. Thompson, for his part, shared this quiet pride, knowing that his son had inherited his most important values: courage, integrity, and respect for the truth. William, despite the pressure and stress, felt a new strength awakening within him. He knew that this ordeal had forged his character and prepared him to face any future challenge with firmness and justice. Life resumed, but with a new awareness: the truth, when courageously revealed, can transform crises into triumphs and betrayals into lasting lessons. The Thompson family, more united than ever, was ready to turn the page and move on, stronger and more resilient than ever. A few weeks after the confrontation, the Thompson mansion had once again become a place of serenity. The lavish parties had been replaced by more intimate gatherings, centered on family and renewed trust. William, now more sure of himself and his choices, felt a deep inner satisfaction. He had acted with courage and integrity. The guests who witnessed the evening's dramatic scenes still spoke of William and his heroic act. Many had been inspired by his courage, some even re-evaluating their own choices and how they dealt with the lies and manipulation around them. The casket, a symbol of truth and justice, was prominently displayed in the family library. Every time William looked at it, he was reminded of the importance of telling the truth, even when it seemed risky or difficult. He now knew that courage was not just a matter of physical strength, but of moral and emotional fortitude. Elizabeth, meanwhile, had disappeared from the Thompsons' social circle. Her reputation tarnished and her influence erased, she had left behind a painful lesson, that deception and manipulation always come to light. William and his parents, more united than ever, understood that true wealth lies not in alliances or fortune, but in trust, sincerity, and strength of character. The Thompson family had come through the ordeal and emerged stronger, confident that honesty and courage always triumph, even in the face of the most sophisticated deception. The evening that should have celebrated a perfect wedding had ultimately celebrated something far more precious: truth, justice, and the triumph of the heart over lies. And this lesson, etched in the minds of the audience and in the now legendary box, would forever remain a part of Thompson family history.